Hey guys, this is Melissa Bachman. Are you ready to stop spooking deer before it's even time to hunt them? Then you need the new Flex S Dark cellular trail camera from SpyPoint. With a no-glow flash option, long-lasting solar power, and a ton of settings that can be changed anytime through the SpyPoint app, there are no more excuses for letting your deer get wise before the season even starts. So check it out for yourself and see why the SpyPoint Flex S Dark is the unstoppable and undetectable scouting tool you need for your next hunt.
Join us at a Friends of NRA event where freedom, fun, and firearms come together like nowhere else. With more than 600 events held across the country, there's always one happening near you. From exciting games to exclusive auctions featuring one-of-a-kind firearms and gear you won't find anywhere else. Whether you're a lifelong hunter, a competitive shooter, or simply passionate about defending freedom, there is a seat for you. Visit friendsofnra.org to find an event near you and get ready for a night you won't forget.
Welcome to DSC's Campfires with Larry Weissoon, a unique blend of hunting, fishing, wildlife conservation, and the outdoor lifestyle. DSC's Campfires is brought to you by DSC, Conservation, Education, and Advocacy. Hornady, accurate, deadly, dependable. Taurus, award-winning revolvers and pistols. Stealth Vision, high-tech, precision-driven equipment for today's modern hunter. Mossberg, American-built, American-strong. Vineyard Max, deer attractants created for the aroma of success, game feeders, and other hunting products. Red 55 Winery, signature wines from Emmy Award-winning country artist Miranda Lambert, owned by Rick and Beverly Lambert. And the Choctaw Hunting Lodge, home of some of the finest hunting in North America. Now, here's Larry.
Good afternoon, Larry. How are you?
I am just fine, John. How are you doing this afternoon?
I am doing great. I am trying to keep from melting over here, but it's not really working.
I will start this here in just a little bit. I'm headed, as soon as I hang up, I'm headed up to the Cotton Ranch here at Kaufman to do spotlight surveys tonight. I've got to do a bunch of handgun sighting in tomorrow, 2 or 3 rifles during the daytime, and then we're going to do the spotlight survey again tomorrow night. And then, of course, Saturday night we got that deal going on in Conroe for DSC Foundation. So it's started. It never quits, I guess. It may be a better description.
Do you ever sleep?
I don't like to sleep. To be honest with you, if my body wouldn't require me to, I would never sleep because there are too many things I want to do. John, what I'll do. Yeah, I'm sure. I got a feeling you're very much the same in a lot of different ways.
Uh-huh.
Let me do a countdown here in just a little bit. I want to talk about your African trip, about the ammo that you used, and then let's talk a little bit about the podcast, and then also about the blogs, and then anything else that you want to promote. Okay.
Okay. And before we start recording, I just wanted to let you know that I actually literally today, my podcast about this came out. I announced my partnership with North Fork Bullets.
Okay.
So I can talk about that or not. I don't want to get you in any problems with
No,
Hornady.
as far as I'm concerned, I mean, I know what I do for Hornady, and I have no problem, as long as I would never badmouth a company of any kind, and certainly not that one because it's a really good bullet company. but
okay,
as far as I'm concerned, no, you can mention, what you were using and all that kind of stuff. I have no problem with that, nor does Hornady, because like I said, I do so many other things for them, and they realize that we're going to have guests on periodically that are not going to be using Hornady and using something else. So that is not a problem as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, very, very good. Let me sit down and close my door and whatnot, and then I will be ready.
Yeah, I just did the same thing. So
good going. All right.
Okay, if you're ready, we'll do a countdown, and then I'll push some buttons here in the office, and we'll go from there.
All right, let's do it. I'm ready.
Okay, this is a recording with Mr. John McAdams. So here we go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, Mr. John McAdams with the Big Game Hunting Podcast. Welcome to the DSC Campfire.
Larry, thank you so much for having me. It is an honor and a privilege to be on your show.
I felt the exact same way not too very long ago when I had the opportunity to be on yours. We talked about all kinds of different things, but particularly different calibers and rounds that I had used and you'd used, really kind of hunting around the world. Now, I know that you're a serious hunter. I know that you live in the northeastern part of the state of Texas. I know that you do a lot of hog hunting. One of these days, I want to come back and do a separate podcast just about how hogs are such a fantastic animal for a test medium. But right now, let's talk a little bit about, you just got back from Africa not very long ago. Tell me about that trip and tell me what you used while you were there.
Yeah, sure thing. Like you said, I was in Africa basically the second half of July this year, so great time to leave the state of Texas and go someplace where it's a lot cooler. And I hunted in the Limpopo and in the Free State provinces of South Africa. Now, Limpopo is one of those places that a lot of people hunt there. Probably some of your listeners are familiar with it. It's a great place to hunt. I love it. It's one of my favorite places in the world. But the Free State, this is my first time going there. I'd hunted Limpopo a couple times, but the Free State is further south in the country. It's kind of centrally located, but it's up in the mountains. And so it's higher elevation, more open country, more rugged terrain in certain parts of it. And so it was a cool hunt where I got to do some higher elevation open country hunting in the Free State and then hunting in the thicker bush belt conditions in Limpopo. So it's kind of a 2-for-1 experience.
That sounds absolutely fantastic. I have traveled through the Free State going some places, but I have not had the chance to hunt it. And, of course, I've been up in Limpopo area, and it's absolutely gorgeous up there in so many different ways. But what all were you hunting while you were there?
So I went to the Free State first, and while I was there, one of the species I really wanted to hunt was a Vol reedbuck. They're a smaller antelope. You've probably heard of them before, right? Have you ever hunted them?
I have. I've hunted them down on the Eastern Cape in the mountains.
Okay. Yeah. So on the other side of the same mountain range that I was hunting, probably.
Exactly. Yes, sir. That's exactly right.
So for those that don't know what we're talking about, they're an antelope that weighs 50, 60 pounds, and they live oftentimes in those higher elevation zones. I wouldn't say they're rare, but they only live in very specific places, and they're not like impala, where you're going to see 100 of them in a day or anything. So they're a more specialized animal, and that was one of the main things I wanted in the Free State. And just so happened, I got really lucky. First day there, we're glassing all afternoon, not seeing anything. And then like 30 minutes before the sun sets, 3 of them stand up and start feeding. I'm like, that's what we need right there. And I brought a Horizon Venatic rifle over in the brand new 25 Creedmoor cartridge, and that is what I used on this part of the hunt.
That's really interesting. To me, those Val-Rebuck are so fascinating. As you mentioned, they're fairly long-legged. They've got a very interesting hair structure to them and straight up horns. So, yes, I've hunted mine, and I'll talk about that. But tell me about the 25 Creedmoor. What were your thoughts, and why did you take it? Obviously, I'm sure you wanted to do some testing with it, but was there any other reason why you were trying to take it or took it as opposed to another caliber around?
So kind of a couple different reasons for it. One, it was new and I wanted to test it out. I like testing out new, interesting things like that. I also thought that it would be an especially good choice for a lighter weight mountain rifle like this for use on a smaller animal. Also on this hunt, I brought my 9-year-old son James with me. We were trying to get him on an animal. And so I was going to use this rifle a little myself, but I also wanted him to use it. And spoiler alert, we did. He ended up killing an impala with it later in the hunt. But I was thinking the volley, as they call it there, would just be a perfect animal to start off with for this cartridge. So we, climbed up halfway up the darn mountain that evening in the rush before the sun went down, and got into position at about 200 yards. And he was quartering away from me a little bit, and I tucked it in behind that right shoulder, and it exited out the point of the left shoulder, and he went, maybe 20 yards after the shot, real unsteadily, and just collapsed like that. And so great start to the hunt. And that actually kind of brings me to the next part in the story too, was I was using 120 grain North Fork semi-spitzer bullet in this cartridge on that antelope. And my goodness, it worked wonderfully. And I used ELDX a little bit on the hunt too, and I can talk about that later. But as you and I are recording this, today is the day that I'm actually announcing that I'm now one of the owners of the North Fork Bullet Company. And so I'm doing a lot of the marketing and testing and whatnot of the bullets. And I'd used it before, but that was one of my first hunts after I bought into the company. So that was exciting on many levels.
That is great news, and congratulations. They do an absolutely fantastic bullet. I had the opportunity when they first got started to shoot some of them, and of course now I've been kind of connected to Hornady for a long, long time. And at the same time, I had the opportunity to test a bunch of bullets as well too. You mentioned that 25 Creedmoor, 25 caliber, no doubt. Now I've shot a lot of things with a 257 Roberts. I've shot one or two things with a 25-06, and those happen to be roe deer in England. What makes this 25 Creedmoor a special round, and what kind of ballistics are you getting out of it?
Sure. So it's a very interesting thing with the 25 Creedmoor, where, as you and probably many of your listeners know, that when you take a cartridge and you neck it down to shoot a smaller caliber bullet, often you can shoot that bullet faster, but it's usually a lower BC bullet, so it doesn't do quite as well in the wind. The interesting thing about the 25 Creedmoor is that when they did that, shoot it faster than the old 6.5 Creedmoor bullet, but it's also a higher BC bullet. And so it is a little flatter, a little better in the wind, and also recoils less too. So it's just a little bit better than the 6.5 Creedmoor in every category like that. And so, for instance, now you were talking about how it kind of compares to 257 Roberts, 25-06, all that stuff. So a 6.5 Creedmoor, 143 grain ELDX, 2,700 feet per second, standard load. 25 Creedmoor, 128 grain ELDX at 2,850 feet per second. But the BC is a little bit higher with the 25 Creedmoor, and so you get a very small boost in your performance in the wind with it, and it's a little bit flatter and all that. Now, so that was I've used some of the ELDX ammo on this hunt, and I was, even out of a 22-inch long barrel, I was getting advertised velocity, 2,850 thereabouts with it. And I also took those 120 North Forks, and they were going about 2930 out of this rifle, and that's very similar to what you're getting out of a plus P load for a 257 Roberts, like the Superformance Hornady stuff. They have 117 grain SST at 2946. So the ELDX load is it's basically fits right in between a 257 Roberts and a 25-06, and in terms of trajectory. But like that ELDX bullet actually does better in the wind, and by 200 yards, it's actually has more retained energy than the 25-06 110 grain ELDX load. And of course, with quite a bit less recoil as well. So it's a very interesting little cartridge. But the other interesting thing about it too is that Hornady is not marketing it nearly as heavily as some of their other cartridges, like the 7PRC. This was a much more subdued launch with it.
It's interesting. It to me, from what you're describing, and I've not had a chance to shoot it, nor have I even had a chance to see one of them yet, even around. But sounds to me like you're talking about a heck of a dead gum Texas deer gun in a lot of instances, a pronghorn gun that it ought to be really supreme when you get right down to it. But then the African side of it, particularly I guess on the smaller end, but I would say probably, I've never shot a kudu with a 25 caliber, but I got a feeling with the right kinds of bullets, that is also a possibility.
Oh yeah, 100%. So on this hunt, I of course killed the Vols reed buck with it. I took it to Limpopo and I killed an Impala with it with the ELDX, and then I killed an Inyala with it also with the North Fork.
Oh, cool.
And then of course my son used it as well, and just boom, 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 everything worked great out of it. Nothing went more than 50 yards. My son weighs about 70 pounds soaking wet. He's a real skinny, lean guy like that. And he and I practiced a lot at the range before we went over there, practiced shot placement and, looking at Kevin Robertson's perfect shot books and of course practice actually shooting at the range. And he shot that Impala, about 50 yards away through a narrow window in the bush, standing off of sticks, and just placed it perfectly on the X. And hit the heart perfectly. And, it was so thick that we could see the Impala when he shot it, and then we could hear that it hit it, and then the Impala disappeared. We're like, all right, what happened? So we crawled up there. It was so thick we had to crawl up to it, and we found a bunch of blood on the ground, and then just looked to the right, and the Impala was right there, like 5-6 yards away from where we were. So it went about as short as you could go and still run afterwards. So very impressive like that. Little guy like him could handle it, shoots it great, no problem, and it was just devastating on everything that we used it on.
And you said that was in a 22-inch barrel.
That's right, yeah. And there's a couple of companies that make 25 Creedmoor rifles right now. Horizon Firearms is the one that I was using. They make it along with many other things. They also pioneered the 22 Creedmoor. Fierce Firearms makes rifles in it, and also Weatherby picked up the rifle almost right out of the gate too. You can get it in a couple different versions of their 307 rifle. And these rifles, I was looking last night, range in price from maybe $1,200-$1,300 on the low end for the Weatherby stuff, up to between $3,000 and $4,000 for the Horizon. So you got a whole spectrum of stuff, and they're all 22-inch barrel, I think, is the most common right now. I think some of them had 24. So pretty good start right out of the gate for them. And we'll see if, companies like Ruger or something picks it up. I think that'd be a real cool thing to offer, like in their American Gen 2 rifle.
That would be an excellent move on their part, as far as I'm concerned. I've had an opportunity to shoot their rifles quite a bit in years past, and more recently it was on a hunt where I had a chance to shoot for their rifles as well too. And that Ruger American, particularly the Gen 2, is a phenomenal gun for the price that you pay for the darn thing. It really has impressed me. It's amazing to me the quality of barrels and to some extent even the triggers that we're getting in some of these lower priced rifles, if you will. They're so much fun to shoot, and I'm one of those that likes to put a lot of money into, or don't like to put a lot of money into anything but hunting. But when it comes down to spending dollars, I really like to spend them on hunts, and I don't mind spending money on optics. I'm thrilled to see some of these rifles that we have available now, such as from Ruger and Mossberg, and even some of the others as well too, that are very, very nicely accurate with various types of ammo. And so to me, I kind of like the idea of spending a little bit more dollars on my optics than I do my rifles. Yeah,
and that, American, the original American was a really good rifle, especially for what it cost, and the Gen 2 is even better. And I know they offered the Gen 2 in 6.5 Creedmoor and 6 Creedmoor, and they recently started offering it in 22 Creedmoor. Wouldn't be surprised if in the next year we see it in 25 Creedmoor as well.
Absolutely. That would only be a logical step as far as what they're doing.
And you were talking about, how you think that the 25 Creedmoor would be a great, especially like Texas deer, pronghorn round, et cetera. I think you're right on the money with it. There's my grandfather's neighbor had a kid that was maybe 10 years old, and that kid started off hunting with a 257 Roberts. Killed javelina, hogs, deer with it, worked great. This is giving you all the good things about the 257 Roberts, plus a little bit more without a lot of extra recoil. And the other interesting thing about it, too, is that, say, with an old cartridge like the 257 Roberts, there's some ammo choices out there for it. I don't know that anybody makes rifles in 257 Roberts anymore.
Not that I'm aware of. Ruger had them out, and Ruger number 1 occasionally. I've got a couple of them that way, but I don't think I can't think of anybody that's at least commercially produced. I mean, there may be some custom rifle makers that for whatever reason are doing it, but I do not know of anybody that's doing a 257 Roberts right now. As you mentioned, ammo, unless you are a strong hand loader or reloader, it's kind of tough to come by.
Yeah, Hornady makes that super-performance load I mentioned earlier, and
Right.
I think Remington and Winchester make some, but those are lighter loads, and so like you said, it's a hand-loading cartridge for the most part these days. But 25 Creedmoor, get stuff right off the shelf, get a factory rifle with it, all that, be wonderful on all those animals, and so this cartridge is one of those ones that's kind of been around for a little while as a wildcat. And last year, I think it was last year, maybe it was 2023, Hornady introduced their 134 grain ELD match bullet, high BC 25 caliber bullet. And a lot of people were using that in various 25 caliber wildcats or modified cartridges with a fast twist barrel to handle it. That thing got to be real popular in NRL hunting competitions because they changed the rules in NRL hunting at some point in the last few years, adding power factor in for some of their divisions, basically that prevented people from using 6mm cartridges in some of those divisions. And the interesting thing about the 25 Creedmoor was that with a 134 grain bullet, you only need to push that thing at, I think, 25, 30, 25, 40 feet per second in your meeting power factor. And it's right there. And so you're meeting power factor, but you have less recoil than almost anything else. And then you have, a little bit better ballistics than the 6.5 Creedmoor and whatnot. And so for something like that, where it's, I don't want to use the term gamified in a derogatory way, but
no.
When people are looking for every tiny little advantage they can get, if you have a little bit, a couple inches less wind hold and a couple inches less less trajectory hold and a little bit less recoil, then that's something that people are going to go for. And I think a lot of people were using it anyway for those uses. And so Hornady was like, well, let's legitimize it and start making ammo for these people and sell it to them.
So it sounds like a wise business decision, simply, if nothing else, from them and their marketing department, and probably the Hornet family as well too. To get right down to it, because I know Steve is still very much involved. Of course, Jason is very, very much involved. But those guys they're great fun to spend time around too. I should add as well. Tell me about some of the. Now you mentioned shooting in Inyala up in the Limpopo area. And how did that hunt go? To me, those are the most beautiful of all the antelope species, and any of the other antelope type species, being the gazelle and those kind of things that I know of in Africa. How was that hunt?
Well, so this was a good example of taking what the bush gives you, as they say.
Yes.
At this point in the hunt, things were going really well, and I was hunting over there with a couple of other podcast listeners, and so I was kind of bouncing around all over the place. Sometimes I'd hunt by myself, sometimes I'd hunt with each of those other guys, but probably about the middle of the hunt, I was like, all right, let's start focusing on my son a little bit. I want to try and get him an opportunity on an Impala. And initially, I wanted him to get kind of a simpler situation where let's get you set up at a water hole, see if something comes in like that, kind of like hunting over a feeder here in Texas. And we were sitting there, we sat there for a couple of days, and it was one of these things like where everything was coming in to drink except Impala. And so we were, of course, seeing zebras, seeing warthog, all this stuff, and but no Impala. And then we're sitting there one afternoon, and we've been there for several hours, and he's like, Dad, I want to go back to camp right now. I don't want to hunt anymore. I was like, okay, let's just give it 10 more minutes. He said, right. Okay. And at about minute 9, I hear a sound behind us, and I slowly turn and look, and it is a big bull Inyala moving through the woods.
Oh, my gosh.
And I turned to him, I said, there's an Inyala coming, whispering to him, just hold still like a statue. And I had the rifle set up on a tripod in front of him, and I just slowly start moving it in front of me. And it was the Creedmoor. That was the only thing we brought out with us this day.
Right.
25 Creedmoor. And that every time, just kind of like how I do it with deer here in the USA, every time that Inyala's head went behind a tree, I'd move some more. And a little bit at a time, and got it set up in front of me. Inyala kept coming over, moved out in front of us, and I shot him at like 30 yards with the Creedmoor with the North Fork. And he staggered and kind of ran unsteadily and disappeared right into the wood line. And then I heard a crash. I was like, okay, I hope that's what I thought it was.
Exactly.
And it turns out he went right into the woods and died, and that was the end of that. And my PH was like, "You shot him with the Creedmoor?" And I was like, "Why wouldn't I shoot him with the Creedmoor, man?"
Yeah.
Like, And it worked great, right? The bullet exited, all that. I hit him right in the heart. And, like I said, he went barely 50 yards after the shot. And so that was a kind of a cool, I won't say unexpected, because I did want an Inyala on this hunt.
Right,
I didn't
exactly.
picture it kind of going like that.
Well, there's a lot to be said to take what the bush offers. In the past, when I hunted Africa a lot, that happened quite often, where you'd be after some other species and where you knew that you'd have another opportunity. It wasn't like the only animal out there that you were hunting, but something would appear and you go, oh my gosh, we need to look seriously at this one, and put on a stalk, and next thing you know, the sticks come up, and and you pull the trigger and you walk up on it and you go, oh my God, we did make the right decision on this one. So now, you mentioned you had podcast clients there. Tell us a little bit about that, and tell people a little bit that aren't familiar with your podcast. I can't imagine anybody not having listened to it. It's one of my favorites. I do listen to podcasts a lot when I travel, and yours is the first one I listen to when I do that. So tell us a little bit about the podcast, but then again, you mentioned some of the, followers that you have that were there in Africa with you. How does all that occur?
All right. So this is kind of a multifaceted answer to the question I'm going to give you.
Okay, good.
So we're recording this in 2025, and all the way back in 2012, I was still in the Army. I was deployed to Afghanistan, and I was nearing the end of my time in the Army. I was going to be, my service was going to be up in about 2 years, and I was like, all right,
sure.
I think I want to get out, but I don't know what I want to do. And so literally one evening after I got off of work, I was on my computer and I did a Google search for how to make money hunting. And I don't know where I found it or any of that stuff. I don't even have it anymore, but somehow I found a guy that was selling like a PDF for like $30 online that was a bunch of different ways you can make money hunting.
Yes.
And it was very well written. The guy had done his research, put together literally like 100 different ways you can do it. Everything from, working as a wildlife biologist, working for different companies in the industry, but one of them was a blogger. And he showed me how to set up a free blog site for myself, how to get stuff published, all that stuff, how to promote it and everything. And so I followed his instructions, started a hunting blog over there, and started to meet people. For some reason, people wanted to read what I was writing at the time.
How fantastic. Absolutely.
And I started meeting people, and I met different outfitters all over the world, and I became friends with a guy in South Africa. Now, at this point, I had hunted Africa twice already. I hunted plains game. I killed buffalo. I killed elephant at this point, all that stuff. And so I was a relatively experienced guy for my age, right? And he was like, listen, I have a really good outfitting setup here. I'm really struggling to sell hunts. Can you help me? He's like, you seem like a nice guy, that you're trustworthy, you know what you're doing. Can you help me? And I said, well, let's see what we can do. So he and I became friends. We eventually became business partners. So I started this hunting blog, and then right after that, I started a company called Big Game Hunting Adventures, where I'm a booking agent selling hunts in Africa. And I've sold hunts at different parts of the world at different times, but I've always sold them in Africa, and I continue to sell them in Africa. And then in 2019, at the urging of my wife, and this was one of these things where she just loves to hear me tell the story, because I say she was right. I should have done it, and I should have done it sooner. I
understood.
Because she had been telling me for years, you need to start a podcast. And I resisted it, and then I finally started it in 2019, and I was like, oh my God, I should have done this 2 years ago, like you told me to. But I started it then, so I'm 6 years into the podcast now. So I started the Big Game Hunting blog, Big Game Hunting Adventures, and then eventually the Big Game Hunting podcast. And on the podcast, I talk about a lot of the stuff I talk about on the blog. I talk about a lot of Africa hunting stuff. I do a lot of cartridge comparisons. So like this thing we're talking about with the 25 Creedmoor versus the 6.5 Creedmoor, like that's right up my alley. I haven't done that exact one yet, but it's coming soon. But I've done, 270 versus 30-06 and all that stuff. And so you publish an episode every week for 6 years. You get to know people and all of that stuff. And so I promote my hunts on the podcast, and at the urging of my partners in Africa, they're like, why don't we try and do a hosted hunt in Africa in 2023?
Oh, cool.
See if anyone wants to hunt with you, and you come over here and bring a couple of podcast listeners, and we'll have a good time in camp. So that's what we did. I brought 2 guys over in 23. We had a great time, and said, let's do it again in 2025. And so I brought 2 guys in 23, and I brought 3 guys over this year. And it was a really cool experience. Guys from all over the country, guys that had different backgrounds. They kind of wanted to hunt similar, but also a little bit different things in Africa and stuff. And so we had one guy who was hunting buffalo, and then the other 2 guys were hunting different species of plains game. And, like I mentioned, everyone had their own pH. And so every day they'd all go out with their pH. And sometimes I'd go out alone. Sometimes I'd go out with Dave. Sometimes with Steve. Sometimes with Chris, all that. And so we all kind of hunted together. We became friends over there. It was a lot of fun. And we recorded a podcast while we were over there. We actually recorded a video, too, that's going to release here very soon, too. We had a video guy over there documenting the whole thing. So it was a super fun hunt. And like I said, we all kind of came home friends. And I also had the privilege of bringing my son over there, too. And he took his first big game animal in the hunt. That was one of the most fun hunts I've ever been on.
I can see that. I was fortunate in years past but I've got 2 daughters and 4 grandsons and 1 granddaughter. And 2 of my grandsons, matter of fact, one of them, Jake, the oldest one, used to film for me for back when I had Trailing the Hunter's Moon. And so he's been to Africa and a few other places with me in Europe and that kind of thing. And then one of my other grandsons I took over to help me. I was there on a leopard hunt in Namibia, and his job was to harvest all the baits that we had. So he was he was rather tickled about that. So he got to shoot several, primarily we shot some impala and hartebeest and I think gemsbuck and a couple other things. But so those, as you mentioned, having family there with you and friends as well, because there were friends on those hunts as well too with us. But those are really special, and I can only imagine how excited your son was, and you probably every bit as excited as he was when he shot that first animal.
Oh, I was. I was standing right behind him, and
oh, Lordy,
I want to do it all for him, but I'm like, no, I got to let him do it himself and all that. He gets the rifle set up, and I see him. He flips the safety off. He's looking through the scope, and he doesn't have his finger on the trigger, and he's waiting. Okay, I see one. And, the tracker told him, he says, okay, this is a good one. You should shoot. It's clear. And he's like, no, there's another impala behind him. He said, okay, let's wait. And then it clears, and then he shoots, one when it was clear. So, I mean, he's only 9 years old, but he's clearly listening to what I'm telling him to. And, man, he just did great. And he did better than I did on my first deer. I missed my first shot on a deer. And he takes great pride in the fact he did better than me on his first year.
The only reason I'm laughing is because I remember being so excited when my daughter shot their first deer that I think I almost hyperventilated, because to start with, they're tugging on my arm. We're sitting there across the log, and gun across the log, and finally the animal comes in, and without realizing I am breathing so heavily and so deep, and finally I get this tugging on my shirt. I go, Daddy, are you okay? You having a heart attack? And I'm going, oh my God. And of course they're calm throughout the entire thing, and pull the trigger, and it, like very typical of the human female, they got excited once we got close to the animal or to the animal. But prior to that, they were the calmest things in the world. I've often said if I could have any feminine trait, and I'm very proud of a heterosexual male, but I do wish I had that, whatever it is, that natural killing instinct or whatever that the human female has, where generally they don't get excited until they pull the trigger, and then when they get up to the animal, then the excitement sets in. But gosh, that being there with particularly with your son, and I was the same thing with my 2 daughters, like I said, and grandkids. They're so special to be there with them, and I know those memories are created, and those memories are never forgotten.
Well, that's 100% right. And so we decided, and I allowed that he's going to get a shoulder mount of that impala, and I'm going to let him put it in his room and everything. I was just talking to the taxidermist yesterday, and I said, listen, we shot 3 impala on this hunt. I want to make sure it's the right one. They sent me a picture of it. It's like, okay, that's the one. Proceed.
Now, John, are you planning on doing more of these in the future?
There's a real good chance that I will. I don't have firm plans to do another one, in 26 or 27. Right. I'm considering doing one in the USA, maybe for pronghorn or something like that next year. But we'll see. And then maybe I go to Africa again in 27 or 28 or something like
Right.
that. But both of them have been great, and I really enjoyed them.
Oh, I can imagine. I've been involved in a bunch of different hosted hunts over the years, primarily through things I do with the Dallas Far Club or DSC Foundation. And to me, it's a little bit different than that, but the people that we've had on those hunts have just been phenomenal. And as you mentioned, you get to know each other and you become very close friends by the time it's all over with. And, really want to spend some more time with them in hunting camp. You mentioned, I know you do some blogs. You have got an ebook out as well, too, if I remember correctly. Tell us a little bit about that.
That's right. So I wrote several years ago an ebook, called The Best Cartridge for Hunting Darn Near Anything. And that is something that I offer on my website. So go to biggamehuntingpodcast.com/ebook, all one word. Sign up there. Right. You get the ebook mailed to you. That also puts you on my email list. And I send out an email every weekday. All of them are about hunting, shooting, ballistics, things like that. And people that are listening to my podcast just absolutely love the emails. And it's a great way for me to interact with people. And I also hear from people, they're like, John, how the heck do you have so much content that you can write one of these every day? And I said, well, it's not always easy, but it's like a muscle, right? You work it out and you get better at it. But that is one of the other things I really enjoy doing. And, like I said, it's also just a really cool way to meet and interact with people like that. Between the booking agency, Big Game Hunting Adventures, writing my blogs for the Big Game Hunting blog, the podcast, and then the emails, as you can see, it's a full-time job with all that stuff.
Oh my gosh. I'm involved in so many different things. I do a lot of writing, and I do some writing almost every day. I don't send out things every day, but seem like, my gracious, you got a new admirer. I'll tell you, somebody that can do that, I am totally enthralled with how you do things. But I've had the opportunity to look at some of your stuff over the years and continue to look at it. Like I said, yours is the one podcast I listen to personally. But my gracious, that's fantastic to be able to do that. And there's something to be said about that, about having that presence with people out there. I know your readers, your listeners have got to truly, truly appreciate that. Now, going back to the ebook. Now, is there a charge for it? Is this something that just comes with signing up, or how does one get to see a copy of that?
Totally free. Just sign up there and I'll send it to you.
Wow, that's fantastic. I noticed the title. I have not done that yet. I've got to go here in just a little bit. We're doing spotlight surveys throughout the eastern, northeastern part of the state for a couple of different properties up there with white-tailed deer. But I think I'm going to go back to your website and for darn sure do that one, because that's really interesting. Because I know you're very knowledgeable, is what I'm trying to say, and it's based upon experiences, and it's based on practice, and it's based again on things that you've done and people that you have trust in. And that says an awful lot. I mean, it really does.
Well, I really appreciate that, Larry. And, coming from a person like yourself that has a ton of experience as well, and even, quite a bit more than I do, I consider that very high praise.
Well, it's meant to be that way, because, like I said, the things that I've seen you do and listen to you've been spot on. And I hate to say that I agreed with you with everything that you said, but I have not found anything that go, what the heck's he talking about? I mean, it's amazing. So hopefully those that listen to you can appreciate some of that as well too. Tell us, unfortunately, I've got to get on the road here in just a little bit, but tell us again how to get in touch with you. The entire gamut of things that you do, and it's numerous things. So how does somebody do that? And we'll make sure we get it in the show notes and a bunch of other places as well too.
All right, sure thing. So first one is the Big Game Hunting Podcast, and you can find that wherever you listen to podcasts, or you go to biggamehuntingpodcast.com. Big Game Hunting blog is my blog. I write articles there. To learn more about the hunts in Africa go to bestsafarihunt.com. And then for the last one, for the email list or for the ebook, go to biggamehuntingpodcast.com/ebook. Sign up there. You'll get that ebook. You'll also start to receive the emails I send out. I do sell things as well, but you don't have to pay to get the ebook. You don't have to pay to just receive the normal emails that I send out. But I do a lot of stuff, but I think that is everything, and where people can go to learn more about all that stuff.
Yeah, I'd say that's a lot. Yeah, I do wonder how you get everything done in the day, but you and I were talking before we got onto this podcast thing that neither one of us, I think, likes to sleep very much. So it's, you know, if it wasn't for my body, and I know you feel the same way, if my body didn't say, hey, you have to sleep, I'd never sleep because there's so many things I want to try to get done. But, John, I want to tell you how truly much an honored I am to have had you on the podcast today. I'd like to come back with you a little bit later. I know I've got a lot of questions that I would love to ask you as well too, from based upon your hunts and your knowledge, and two, to again somewhere down the way touch on some of the hog hunting thing, because to me they're the finest animal there is and available to us, thankfully, throughout Texas as a bullet tested medium, if for nothing else. So I'd love to come back and talk more about that as well too.
I would love to do that. I have shot a bunch of hogs. One of the things I started doing the last year is, oh gosh, I forgot, I have a YouTube presence as well, Big Game Hunting Blog on YouTube.
Oh, okay.
One of the things I do there is I share ballistic gel test results. I'll pick a load, shoot ballistic gel with it. This is how it does. And then one of the other things I like to do is I like to go out and shoot a hog with that exact load I tested in gel, and then show people, okay, this is how it performed in gel versus, okay, here's how it actually performed on the hog. And it's very interesting how well they line up with each other oftentimes.
Yes, that is super interesting. Like I said, over the years, I've used those as a test medium for all kinds of different bullets and loads and that kind of thing. And hopefully get a chance to do a little bit more of that in the future as well, too. John, thank you again so very much. We'll try to get all the things that you do in the show notes. And thank you so much for being with us. And we'll see everybody here next week around the campfire. Not sure where we're going to be next week, but please join us, and we'll find out then.
Larry, thank you so much for having me on the show. I enjoyed talking with you.
Amen. Same here. John, I will be in touch.
DSC's Campfires with Larry Weishuhn has also been brought to you by The Crown Bar in LaGrange, Texas, the Texas Wildlife Association, Double Nickel Taxidermy, and Burnham Brothers Game Calls.
This episode is brought to you by ESPN. Catch the first WWE Premium Live event on ESPN, WrestlePalooza, live on Saturday, September 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. It's going to be an epic night in Indianapolis, featuring some of the biggest WWE superstars. This event is only on ESPN, so go to stream.espn.com and sign up to the ESPN app today for your all-access pass to WrestlePalooza and all WWE Premium Live events.